The question is for you. Does the Quran teach that Muhammad sinned? You got it?
Yes. The Quran does teach that Muhammad sinned in such places as chapter 40 verse 55, chapter 48 verse 1 and 2, as well as chapter 47 verse 19.
Shall I respond?
Yes. Yeah, 2 minutes.
All right. Now, very quickly, the verses which Sam is referring to actually speak about God commanding the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to seek forgiveness for his sins. And Muslims agree that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a human being, like the rest of us, do have sin. And he said himself, every child of Adam is a sinner, but the best of sinner is he who repents after having committed sins. And he advised his followers to seek forgiveness of God often, and he said that even I seek the forgiveness of God 70 times a day. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that he sins 70 times a day deliberately, but as a human being, he realizes that we are fallible and we have to return to God for his forgiveness. And the promise of God is that he does forgive sins, and his promise in the Quran is that he has forgiven the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for his sins past and future.
Dr. Shabir, the question is Jesus sinless according to the Quran?
So there's no clear statement in the Quran that answers this question in a succinct manner. But there is an interesting verse saying that when the angel came to Mary to give her the good news that she will have a son, he says, لِأَهَبَ لَكِ غُلَامًا زَكِيًّا, so that I may confer on you a pure boy. So that would, point to his sinlessness. And but of course, that is not so comprehensive, because if it's talking about a pure boy, how do we know that this boy remained pure throughout his life?
And we believe all children are sinless, right?
Yes, children are sinless by definition. They're born pure, and they're born on what we call the fitra, the natural disposition to worship God, and so on. And later on, when they reach the age of discretion, then they will choose their paths, either to continue worshiping God or to turn away. But the fact that this is mentioned about Jesus in particular is distinctive, and we should give credit to that. Sometimes in the Quran, there is a mention of a prophet doing something which is not quite Islamic, but it's excusable because of circumstances or credited to human nature, not gross sins like committing adultery or something like this. Whereas in the Bible, we have reports about some prophet, like let's say David committing adultery with Bathsheba. But in the Quranic story of David, though the story is told at length, this detail is not there. And Muslims are able to interpret the Quranic stories in a way that upholds for Muslims the integrity and moral disposition of the prophets in this way. But of course, as human beings, they're prone to error. They make, sometimes they are pressed by circumstances and so on, and they budge a little bit from what we might consider to be ideal. In the case of Jesus, however, and no such thing is mentioned. So Jesus comes out very clean in the Quran. He's praying for his people in the end, and so on. And to the extent that on the day of judgment, Jesus will be called to witness against his people. So his people erred and deviated from the teachings, but Jesus himself, again, comes out very clean.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well,
because you mentioned that the other prophets might have some slight blemishes to them, right?
Yes, it could be that the Quran is, reaching out with an olive branch to people. And because Jesus was held in such high esteem among our Christian communities, then the Quran, not wanting to offend anyone, is, presenting Jesus in a way that a Christian can read about that and say, yeah, this is just like we believe in Jesus. The main difference is that, Jesus is not God according to the Quran, but he is well respected and presented in a way that we can feel comfortable reading. In the Hadith, however, there are more indications that will help us to think of Jesus as being sinless. So one hadith speaks again about the childhood, more so the birth. It says that when a child is born, Satan touches that child and causes the child to cry. And that's the case of every child except for Jesus and his mother. So this, in a way, speaks to the Immaculate Conception of Mary, but it also speaks about Jesus being born in a way that he's not touched by the devil when he was born. But that still does not get to the sinless part. More to the point is that on the Day of Judgment, it is said in Islamic tradition that people will be in turmoil, just waiting for the judgment to begin, and then very anxious to know what their outcome will be. And they will plead with their prophets to just please intercede with God, asking him to just let's start the judgment, get this over with. And when they approach the prophets one after another, the prophets will confess to some mishap in their own lives, something that is considered to be less than ideal. And they will say, I don't have a face to turn to God now, go to the next one. So then they will keep going to one prophet after another until they come to Jesus. And when they come to Jesus, Jesus will defer them to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to be sure. But he does not mention anything that could be characterized as a sin. He doesn't say, for example, as the other prophet said, that, okay, maybe I said that thing which is not quite true, or something of this nature. So in the Islamic tradition, again, Jesus comes out to be, in the Muslim view, sinless, as we believe that prophets in generally are. At least they do not succumb to great moral failures. But in general, we know that prophets are human beings, and they may make a momentary slip of a human nature, which is forgivable and excusable. But in the case of Jesus, we don't even have a mention of such a slip.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.